Welcome to the Histories of Northamptonshire podcast series, and this episode number 39. Recorded on location, each episode tells the story of one of the many and varied objects which are the focus of the exhibition A History of Northamptonshire in 100 Objects. The exhibition runs at the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery between the 20th of September 2025 and February 2026. Selected by local individuals, heritage groups and the museum's own curators, each object tells a different story from the county's past. And so, to our guest for this episode.
My name's Daniel Tabor. I'm representing the Northampton Interfaith Forum and also the Northampton Jewish community.
Tell me about the object that you have in the exhibition.
The object I've got in the exhibition is part of a tombstone from the Jewish cemetery in Northampton, dating to the middle of the 13th century. It's inscribed in Hebrew, and it's in memory of Solomon, a rabbi and a scholar, and it's probably the only surviving medieval Jewish tombstone in England.
What do we know about the Jewish community in England from that time?
Well, we know that it was a small community. There were 3 centres. Northampton was one of the centres. The other centres were London and Lincoln. The Jews were actually the property of the king. They were brought over as part of the Norman conquest, and they were part of the administrative machine. And because of the restrictions on what Jews were allowed to do and trades they were or weren't allowed to practice, they were mainly used by the king and the nobles to raise money, to raise loans for the royal exchequer.
So what was the reception of the indigenous community to Jewish people of a different faith?
It varied. The Jewish community in Northampton never numbered more than about 80 souls, which was considered quite a fair-sized community. There was protection from local clergy, but there were times when there were also anti-Semitic riots. So it was very variable, and I would have thought a fairly precarious existence, actually.
You mentioned that there were 3 centres for Jewish people. It wasn't easy being Jewish in England.
Absolutely not. And, you know, in our present terms, there's not a big population. You have to remember also that Northampton was in the centre of England, it had a large castle, and it was an important administrative centre in medieval England.
Would it have been immediately obvious that a Jewish person was Jewish?
On the whole, Jews wore distinctive clothing. They didn't have the yellow star or anything like that, but I think people would have known who the Jews were and would have been able to identify them.
So it wouldn't have been discriminatory, but it would have been obvious?
Yes, I think so. I think that's a fair comment.
And that centre, did that centre grow as of that era, or did that follow later?
Well, it's an interesting question, exactly what the Jewish community was like at that period in the 13th century. There was a rabbi. As far as we know, there was a yeshiva, which is like an academy for the study of religious texts and for the study and for the training of religious Jews, some of whom may have gone on to become rabbis, all men, of course. So that does suggest that in the medieval period, at least for a time, it was a flourishing community, but the numbers were small. The other thing I need to mention is also that there were links between the Jewish community and Jewish communities on the continent. So the object, the tombstone fragment, which is most probably unique, is engraved in the style very similar to tombstones that have been discovered in the Rhineland. So there were clearly links between the Jewish community in Northampton and continental Jewish communities. It's the engraving in Hebrew is similar to the style of fragments of Hebrew tombstones that have been found in the Rhineland. And I'm relying very much on the expertise of Marcus Roberts, a local archaeologist and historian.
You mentioned that this particular tombstone came from a Jewish cemetery. What do we know about the person whose tomb is commemorated in this tombstone?
We know that he was a rabbi, Rabbi Solomon, son of Moses. And we know that he was an author of a number of religious texts. I don't know if those religious texts actually survive, but apart from that, very little is known about him.
And the tombstone itself, was this taken from the cemetery? Was this a piece found elsewhere, or what?
This is a Northamptonshire mystery. It was discovered sometime in the 19th century. Nobody actually knows where, and there's no record about where it was found. And it was only, in a way, rediscovered in the 20th century in the museum. Marcus Roberts, the historian I've referred to, who's done a lot of work on the Jewish presence in Northampton in the medieval period, identified the site of what would have been the medieval Jewish cemetery. And that was most probably located in Temple Bar off the Barrack Road. And in the 1990s, he conducted excavations there and discovered 3 medieval skeletons, 2 men and 1 woman. And later on, a little bit later, there was a formal reburial of these skeletons in the Jewish cemetery that exists today off the Toaster Road. So it's a sort of coming full circle, if you like, from the medieval Jewish community to the present-day Jewish community.
Daniel, you've talked about the Jewish cemetery. Were there well-established places of worship that the Jewish people were able to go to in this somewhat oppressive kind of a context that you're painting with your words today? Was there much of that was available to them?
Yes, there was a synagogue. And actually, I've seen a map from the 17th century before the Great Fire of Northampton where there is a stone structure that was labelled as the Jews' house, which somehow had survived from the medieval period. But it's thought that the medieval synagogue was in Fish Street. And again, Marcus Roberts, with the help of a researcher from Birmingham University, they did these sort of excavations with deep sort of radar that's used to identify underground structures. Under the kebab shop and the adjacent pub, they discovered ancient walls and a structure that looks like it could have been a mikveh. And a mikveh is a sort of ritual bath that's used either when women complete menstruation or when men go to purify themselves before important holy days. So it's thought that in Fish Street there are the foundations of the medieval synagogue.
And this would have been an extremely important place to that Jewish community, and as you say, one of the larger communities in England in that era.
Definitely, it would have not just been a place of prayer, but as in a synagogue today, it would have been a community centre. And what I also find very moving is that this site is less than half a mile away from the current synagogue of the Jewish community in Northampton.
When we talk about the community of the present, how big is the Jewish community in the Northamptonshire area? What sort of growth, therefore, can we talk about from medieval periods to now?
In the census, over 200 people in Northampton registered as Jews. But actually, in terms of the current Jewish community, which was founded in the late 19th century, there was between 60, 70 souls altogether. It's an ageing community. When I first moved to Northamptonshire 40 years ago, it was a larger community. And because young people have grown up, moved away, it's now a shrinking community.
But when you consider the total community of just the county town of Northampton, bearing in mind that this is the histories of Northamptonshire, the Jewish community from the 13th century compared to the proportion of the community now that is from the Jewish community, it's vanishingly small. It's a very, very small constituent part.
It's very small. And you have to remember there were 400 years when after Jews had been expelled in 1292, when there was no Jewish presence in Northamptonshire at all. So it's only in the 17th and 18th century that Jews started to sort of drift back to Northamptonshire. And the development of with the result of the Industrial Revolution, the development of the boot and shoe industry and related businesses, those were all a great stimulus to the developing Jewish community in the 19th century.
Daniel, what is your personal reaction to this particular object which is in the exhibition?
Well, I'm very moved by it because it's a link. I'm part of the small Jewish community in Northampton, and it's a link that we have with Jews who lived here over 700 years ago. And the fact that we can celebrate that and say something about what the life of those Jews was like, but also celebrate the flourishing nature of the Jewish community today, I find that very poignant.
Why should this item be in the exhibition? Why should this be part of the histories of Northamptonshire?
Because it is the histories of Northamptonshire. And so the Jewish community is one of those histories. And it's, I think, a very interesting and in some ways a rather significant picture, an element in the medieval history of our county. I think it's very important that we acknowledge that there was a Jewish presence here. The Jews who lived here did not have an easy time, and as you know, they were expelled in 1292. But they had a part to play in the life of the town, and most probably the life of the county.
It is a fascinating arc that you have described.
It's an arc, absolutely an arc. And I mean, the other thing to say, and it's perhaps obvious in a way, that people in Northamptonshire are not going to meet many Jews. But when you do meet Jews who are just like normal people, only more so, Jewish joke, you have to remember that they are the survivors. They are the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of refugees and immigrants. And they are the ones that have survived. And all the others in those families didn't survive. And I find that very moving just to reflect on that as well.
I sense that reflection. I sense the poignancy, but I also sense immense pride too.
Absolutely. Yes. The resilience and determination and the creativity of the Jewish community, in broad brush terms, is, I think, remarkable.
It is quite an object. It's quite a journey. Daniel, thank you so much for telling the story.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this Histories of Northamptonshire podcast. If you would like to find out more about the objects or listen to other episodes in the series, go to www.northamptonmuseums.com. Alternatively, you can visit the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery, where you can see the A History of Northamptonshire in 100 Objects exhibition for yourself. The Histories of Northamptonshire project is funded by Arts Council England as part of the National Portfolio Programme.